Hey, welcome everyone. Today more than ever, the world needs voices that spark change, ignite hope, and drive transformation. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when individuals choose to step forward, speak up, and take bold action. Whether you're leading a global movement or making a difference in your own community, your voice has power. In this podcast, we aim to amplify those voices, share the journeys of resilience, change makers, and inspire each of you to recognize your potential to impact the world. Let's create a ripple effect together. This message taps into the concept of collective empowerment and emphasizes the significance of individual contributions in driving social change. Welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and today I have two amazing guests. I have Rhonda and Heather. Rhonda is at the bottom of the screen. Heather is in the top left. This is a mother-daughter combination, and today we're going to be talking about basically how God sent a message. And I love this topic because so many of my guests have had that certain awakening, right? And me even being on the other side, and even me battling my 8-year weekend cocaine and alcohol usage, I think all of us had got some type of message from a higher power, whatever that higher power may be for you. So, ladies, Heather, Rhonda, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with me. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And I just want to throw out a little plug too for Brian Clegg for introducing me to you, Rhonda. I mean, I love Brian. He's an amazing guy, and I got to reconnect with him when I was working at the chamber down at City Hall, and we realized we knew one another and went to high school. And I actually went to high school with your late husband as well. And man, those were some good old days. That's for sure.
Yes, sure.
Small
So,
Lake City for sure.
yeah, it really is. So, Rhonda, let our listeners know a little bit about you.
Um, well, as of today, I guess I'm 7 years, 10 months sober, maybe 9 months sober, and my addiction lasted for 20 years. And so kind of like, growing up, it was just a thing. You had high school parties and stuff like that, and you partied, and it was really no big deal. And you just had alcohol around you, you had a couple beers, what have you. And once I got out of high school, I really just got into working out. Corey, as you know, was a bodybuilder, and I was so skinny that I just wanted to add weight. So I really put myself into that. And kind of where I started drinking a little bit more was I worked at a repair shop for 10 years. And one guy got hired and we started having beer 30. So I started having a couple beers every night and so forth. And once again, no big deal. Yeah, I never had alcohol at my house, and I always drank. I was always drinking a little bit, and so like when I got pregnant with Heather, I completely quit drinking, and uh, sorry, I'm getting nervous.
It's okay.
So anyway, kind of where my uh, addiction to alcohol became more relevant was when I became a stay-home mom. Now, I was a mom that worked 10 hours a day, worked out, took care of my daughter. And when Corey wanted to start his own business, we decided I would stay home. And it's kind of where my alcohol would come in effect, because later in the afternoon, I'd go buy a 6-pack. But during this time, did not realize it, but Corey was already hooked on pain pills. And once he wasn't able to get the pain pills is when he got onto heroin. And so anyway, he came off that and we battled it. He asked me, would you like to do some heroin so you can understand? I said, no, I don't want that misery. I just don't want it. And he eventually came off it. And by this time he was only sniffing it. And then he got back on it. And this time he was doing with needles. And you know, I just felt like it was a constant battle with him, you know, trying to help him come off. Now I'm drinking more, and we have a little girl that uh, we desperately wanted, and so I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So anyway, this is kind of where my heartbreak story comes in, where I kind of just gave in to the whole addiction. So when Corey had finally came off heroin, he went directly on a steroid run, and he went from 190 to 240 within a month. And with that, it was kind of like, I mean, steroids make you honor your meat anyway, but he just became like super narcissist, you know, it's his way or no way. And he was just like, his whole being just changed. Like he became this mean person. And he ended up having an affair on me because of this, because he said, you know, he was attracted to all kinds of women. He was getting into that party scene. And one day he just come home and said, we were supposed to go out, and he was here. Do you want to try something? And it'll put you in a better mood. And by this time I was like, no. But when he showed me the needle, and mind you, it was called Nubane. Now knowing what Nubane is, it's just a pain blocker. Heather told me this, it's just a pain blocker, you know, and we're over there shooting it up, think we're getting high. But I remember thinking, this isn't doing nothing to me. And so once he wasn't able to get that supply, that's when he got heroin, and he brought it home, and we were supposed to go to a Super Bowl party. And I'm like, God, you know, I that looks nasty. Are you sure? And so my introduction to drugs was IV, was with the needle. And I was sicker than the dog. I mean, I was throwing up, and then he came back to the party with Narcan, and he brought me out of it. And so I just swore it off. And then a week later, he comes to me and he says, here, I want you to try this one. You'll like this one better. And this time it had cocaine in it. And I liked it. And now I had something in common with him. Now we can go party together. We can, you know, he'll start loving me back again, and he'll want to only be with me. And I was willing to do that until it got to the point that, in mind you, our habit was $200 a day. We were spending $3,200 a month. That was my household bills. And I mean, I'm just getting a little bit. He's getting all of it. And then I was hooked. You know, I looked sick, and when we talk about a God thing, how I decided to come off heroin, one, uh, it just wasn't. I didn't like it. I didn't want to be there. I hated it. And I remember having a dream, and I was in this like well, like water coming down, like really old and dungy, and like you hear a voice say, "You're never gonna get out." And I turned around, and looked, and there was like a man sitting in a throne. So that next day, I went to go get on methadone, but I couldn't, and so I went to my doctor, and he gave me some pills to come off of cold turkey. And I don't remember all of it. I just remember what I looked like when I was done. I had fallen a lot, so I had a lot of bruises on my faces, and you know, that's the dramatic part about it. But when I came off it, I could not figure out, because everybody kept saying, "Oh, once you're off a week, you know, you're going to be okay." And I just was not okay. There was just something inside me that was broken. And I was going to the pharmacist, I was going to my doctor. I'm like, I have no energy. They're, you know, they're all, no one had an answer. And where I'm going to kind of cut this part off, now that I understand the brain, because I did some online courses and stuff, and just so people understand, you know, you have your, maybe Heather could help me with the word, but neurons or something, you know,
Yeah,
those little
neurons.
things.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so when you're doing drugs, it's here. But when you come off it, it's here. And it's got to take a minute to come up. And if people can understand that you will get better. But I wasn't getting better. And I was like a couple months, and, you know, I had to still run Corey's business, not to be a mom. I'm sick the whole time, and I'm not feeling better. And I went to the store and I bought some beer, and it still wasn't doing anything. And then one day someone handed me a cigarette they hear this will help. And it was like the zing I needed. It was like that craving I was looking for. And so I started smoking, never picked up a cigarette a day in my life. So now I'm drinking. So I hurry and go guzzle 3 or 4 beers and have a cigarette so I can get that same feeling and feel normal. And that just turned me into a full-fledged alcoholic. And so
So,
during this time,
so I just want to pause you just for a second, so I did a post about a month ago on the word normal, how society looks at normal. What is normal? And
Mhm.
and my version of it is there's really no such thing as normal. I've heard
Right,
people say, well, you grew up in a normal family. Okay, well, what's considered a normal family? I mean, seriously, what is,
Yeah. Yeah.
right,
because we all all families have their dysfunction. I don't
mhm,
care how close you are, how much you love one another, we all have our dysfunction. So really, what is normal? And however, I get what you're saying on feeling normal to where at least you felt like you were coherent in life instead
right,
of that
right.
battle and those voices in your
Yeah,
head,
yes,
going on. And I also love how you said about the neurons up here and then down here, because now we're starting to fire those unhealthy neurons, and we're doing everything we can to bind them to make them stronger, just so we can feel the way that we want to feel.
right,
And
right.
unfortunately, as time goes, we're constantly chasing that same feeling because we never get it back. We're chasing it,
No,
we're hoping to get it
yes,
back, we're wanting to feel it again. But after those first couple times, after that, it's gone. It's long
yeah,
gone.
yep,
So I think that's where maybe the word normal could come in, because at least we want to start feeling like our old selves before
right,
all the chemicals and all the bullshit got into our system and starts firing our brains in all kinds of different negative directions.
right. Yeah, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, you just want to feel like you're alive, like there's just something inside you. And so, there's, Corey's still using, and we're just getting meaner and meaner with one another. And it just got so bad that, I mean, one time he did take me to a rehab, and I was there for 30 days, and I think I was sober 90. And I just went right back to it, still kind of naive about all of it and being sober. So eventually he asked me for a divorce, but during that time he had already met someone and he was going to go live with them. And I was just devastatingly heartbroken over this, because I fell in love with him when I was 18. I mean, we're already like, well, we were 10 years together by the time we had Heather. And I don't know what happened. It's just something happened. Like everything, you think you can dabble and try it and let it be fun, and ends up being your life. And so where my issue started coming, I started drinking more and more, and I never went to hard alcohol, but I got really heavy. And so when I did that, now I kind of understand how to go get drugs and what to do and who to go to. And I went to a coworker and asked him to get me meth so I could have energy, so I could lose some weight, so I could feel better. And it worked, of course, until it didn't work. And then what happened was, the person that I was going through was to have me going straight to the dealer. And this guy was, nothing but pure evil. But it got to the point he'd say, "Hey, do you want to come over, smoke a bowl?" And I went and go get Heather, and Corey had to go get Heather. And I started just, I lost the weight, and and the one thing about meth, most people will know, is it's a mind game. And like when you get heroin, you go buy it, they throw it in your car, they take your money, and they run. Meth makes you chase it all freaking day. So I would get there and I would smoke some stuff with him, and then he'd be pissed if I want to leave. And so it was always constantly trying to be a mother and trying to please him because he's smoking me up. So in the short version of that, Heather really got put on the back burner. Not that I wanted it to be that way, but it's, you want to be high, but and you want to be a mom. So I used to hallucinate and think, people were getting sexually assaulted and things, like meth plays on your worst fears. And this Chris would just keep it in my head. And I'm like, God, do you think Heather's been like molested? Something's been hurt. And I don't even know, like someone put it in my head once and and it stays sat there. So I went to her school and to get her out because I was afraid something was going to happen and so eventually what happened was I was arrested for intoxication and Heather at that time was taken from me. I had no rights to her and
Mm.
social service was involved and within that 6 months I lost my job. I lost Heather and I was living on the streets. I was living in my car. Uh, the first day I was out, I had nowhere to go and someone had taken my car and I had to find I'm just kind of sitting in an enclosed area, just like, where do I go from here? It's freezing outside, but I managed to get myself to a house. And there's like, this is a safe place. The guy's got dope and whatever. So I'm still waiting for this guy to bring me back my car that he took off with. So, anyway, the guy's like, well, if you want to go up in my room, just hang out in there. I got other people downstairs. As I go in there, he locks the door and he's got like porn on and stuff like that. And, now my mind's racing and all I can do is hear people downstairs screaming. So I call the cops to come get me out of there. And, so all those people got arrested. Now they were after me. And I mean, like, so when I say God sent, I never really got physically hurt by anybody. I mean, there's a lot of times I could have been. And within the I had a reliable car that I was sleeping in, and they also stole all my clothes out of the car. So I had no clothes. All I had was my car, and I can't remember exactly. For some reason, my car was at another house, and they decided to change out my ignition lock because they had to get my car to me, but it didn't work. And so to get that fixed, I thought, maybe I'll just sell the tires on my car and I'll put some cheap ones on and I'll get my car fixed. And I've said that to someone else. So the next day I go and my car's on blocks. So now I'm just couch surfing. I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to stay. Nobody want me around. And so yeah, I ended up living on the streets. And then we went to court and, because Corey was able to come off of pain pills, he got full custody over Heather because I couldn't give up the meth. And, during that time, all I ever heard was how bad she disliked me and my family are yelling at me to get my shit together. And I just really felt super alone. And I thought the only people that understood me was the drug addicts, because I went from this to this. And
Isn't it crazy, Rhonda, how something we fought to stay away from that ends up sucking us in, that literally steals everything that
yeah,
means something to us, you know? And I'm not just talking material things, right? Because that's just material things, but
yeah,
it's our children, it's our spouse, it's our family, and it's really good friends. And we find ourselves really, and it takes time to get there, but it feels like it just happens overnight, where now
mhm,
we have nothing, and we're we're thinking, because our brain is not healthy and it's firing in a negative way, that those are the only people that care for me, and it's the people that are doing it with you, right? And,
right,
and it's like
right,
you're trapped because you're like, well, they're the ones that love me, but really they could care less about you.
absolutely,
They're only there for a couple reasons, and to kind of, I'd like to have Heather jump in if I may, if
yeah.
it's okay to have
Yeah.
Heather jump in a little bit. So, Heather, I mean, how how old were you at the time when you really started noticing there was a change that was starting to happen, and you're starting to notice that maybe you're not getting the attention that you used to because
Yeah.
something is pulling your mom away or even your dad away from you?
hmm Yeah, so I remember, I think when this all like kind of I started realizing, I was probably, and mom, you might have to like jump in and tell me ages too, but I feel like I was maybe around like 7 when
Yeah, you're in
you and
second grade
dad,
when that happened.
yeah, when you and dad like started separating. Um,
Kindergarten. You're kindergarten by
okay,
then.
so I was younger. So I was kind of a younger age, but I remember being like 5, 6, ish. Um, and they would argue a lot. Um, and I remember that's kind of like the first thing that I start to remember. I'm like, because like I'm gonna preface this with like I never um like my parents being together was weird. Like I was just not used to them being a couple. And so the earliest kind of memories that I really have, of my childhood and onward was being about 6. And they would argue, they would fight, but I remember them separating and I almost felt like relief, because I was like, oh, like they're not fighting, they're not arguing. Like, so in my brain, they've always been like two separate parents to me, like never parenting together, but kind of two separate. Um, and I remember, and it's hard for me because I think, a lot of what I went through was very difficult. Um, and so I don't really have like a lot of really good memories of that time. I think because it was difficult and I probably, blocked out a lot of it. But kind of the gist of it, from what I remember, being about that age, they separate. And I'm living with mom at the time in our house. And I think at that point, dad had moved in with grandma. Um, and I think I must have been, I don't know, like 9, do you think? Because I remember,
Mhm.
like, you were drinking a lot, um, and it just, I think grandma was living with us at the time, and I just kind of I felt like you kind of always just had your own thing going, right? And like we're kind of always just doing that. But I remember it kind of got really difficult when I was about when you talk about like using meth and all of that time. Um, I don't know, I must have been like 9 or 10.
Mhm.
Um, but I remember like seeing that, and I don't know, kids don't realize, or adults don't realize how perceptive kids really are. Like how much they pick up just on everything. So I knew that there was something going on. But of course, I'm at the age that I don't really know. All I know is my mom is behaving weird. Like she's um like kind of going in the attic and like looking for cameras and just kind of doing some off the wall stuff. And then this gentleman that she talks about was kind of around and I didn't really know him. And I just remember like feeling really like uncomfortable and really like insecure in my home, right? Like I don't know what's going on, like everything's upended, I don't know what's happening, and I'm just like really like something doesn't feel right and I don't know what it is.
Right.
Um and just having that confusion at that age was really just like it was just difficult. Like you just don't have a context at that age for what's going on. Um but I remember like I would go to like my friend's house and things and I would be like, wow, like I wish that, I wish that I had this normal life, right? And it's like coming back on the terms of normal, what really is normal. But I was like, I wanted my mom, and um, it was really hard to not have that like stable relationship at that age. Um, and so I just remember thinking like, wow, I wish like, I wish like my mom was here and I wish she would like spend time with me and I wish, all of that. And then at the time when and I'm sorry, I kind of jump around because it's hard for me to think of specifics because I think, that's just kind of what the brain does, is it
Yeah.
tries to not make you think about the things that are really tough and really difficult. Um, and it's just interesting to hear it all from her perspective, because during this time, like, you know, I don't see my mom. I don't ever, you know, interact with her, and I'm living with my dad, who now at the time I understand was also having his own struggles, right? Um, but it was actually during that time when I primarily lived with him, um, around this time, you know, when she was, you know, living in her car and things, that like my dad and I had always been really close, but this was where I think during this time that like we were like thick as thieves, you know, like we became super, super close, like, because he was like at the time the parent that was present and consistent and, you know, there. And so him and I became really close at that time for sure.
Yeah, and probably not even realizing too, he's got his own battles going on
Yeah.
as
Oh,
well
not
at
at
that
all.
time,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And
You
it's
know,
really, oh, sorry,
I
go ahead.
like what you said, Heather, too, about, you know, not quite understanding all
Yeah.
of it, you know, and about 2 years ago, I did a show with a mother and daughter.
Hmm.
And it's when I had my studio. They were both in the studio and they were sitting next to each other. And I had a guest co-host that was joining me that day. And I tell you what, that was such an emotional day
Hmm.
for everybody, because this lady who is the mom, who I've known very well for quite a while, you know, she's telling her story, and you can see that her daughter really kind of wanted to jump in.
Hmm.
You could see how uncomfortable she was, and her mom kept going over and patting her on the hand, you know, and say, it's okay, mom
Yeah.
can handle it, say what you need to say,
Yeah.
not realizing, even for me at that time, that the daughter still had no idea the whole story
Hmm.
about her mom.
Yeah.
And I don't like to force people to say things. If they're not comfortable, then I'm not here to try to be a Jerry Springer, right? To try to cause issues, you know?
Listen, we've got enough
However,
content for that too, okay?
right, yeah, that's a whole different show, and it's not definitely a show I don't want to be a part of.
No.
But however, I kept asking these certain questions, and then her mom, of course, kept saying it. And finally, probably about 40 minutes within the show, she finally opened up, and she
Yeah.
just broke down and started bawling.
Yeah.
She goes, Mom, I thought you left all us kids because drugs and alcohol and living on the streets was more important than us.
Yeah.
Because that was her perspective as a young girl.
Yeah.
And then my friend, who is crying also, is like, "Sweetie, no. No, no,
Yeah.
no, no. I always wanted you in my life." Just like Rhonda's saying, she wants to be the mom that she dreamed of being. She wants
Right.
to be there for you. It's just that she did not want her children to be around her while she was using, because she knew it was unhealthy
Right.
and it was something she couldn't control. And to be able to see the bond of those two, I mean,
Mhm.
immediately it's like that glass was shattered, and all
Yeah.
of a sudden this bond started happening, because then they started seeing it through each other's eyes. And it
Hmm.
was such, oh my gosh, such a
Yeah.
spiritual awakening in the whole studio that day for every single person that was involved.
Yeah. And it's, you know, I think I'm really thankful. Um, I will say right now with mom, this is like probably the best, at least I feel our relationship has ever been.
Mhm.
Um, and thankfully she has been very, very receptive of everything that I've said. Um, I won't jump ahead too far, but when I when I became pregnant with my child, I had a lot of these repressed feelings kind of come up. So a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, and and I remember we were sitting in the car one day, we were going to get something to eat. She's like, "Are you mad at me?" And I said, "Yes, like I am extremely upset with you." Um, and we just, you know, cried. And like, I will say, like, thankfully her and I have kind of had a lot of these conversations. Um, so we're very, very open with talking about like how these things affected me, kind of what she went through, and then what she went through with my dad and things. So I still do kind of hold a little bit back because I don't want to hurt feelings, you know, but um I will say, like, I'm very thankful that we've gotten to a point where I can just communicate, and it feels like a way, because I felt like for most of my childhood and up until, you know, my mid-20s, like I just wasn't heard. Like nobody, I just wasn't heard, you know, kind of by mom and by, you know, a lot of my family with what I went through. And to finally get to a point where I am heard, you know, that is really therapeutic and really healing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Kind of like the intro of the show, right? About using our voice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not the voice, the voices of the guests that come on the show. It's just using our voice also to communicate.
Right.
You know, I had a good friend of mine call me yesterday, and he had to have a really tough conversation with his girlfriend, and he was telling me how it went. And I was so happy to hear that she was very open and willing to hear what he had to say, and he was really open to listen to what she had to say. And the
Mhm.
conversation went really well. There was no arguing, no fighting. It's like, I'm breaking up with you, none of that stuff. And it's the proper way of using our voices, right? So we can be heard, because I really do believe in, and I'm just as guilty. I am not freaking innocent by all means, because it's taken me a lot of years to figure this out. Our voices are heard much better when we can sit down and have, okay, we'll just say, an adult conversation
Right.
without our egos getting in our way,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And but when we're yelling and screaming at one another, no one hears anything. No one
Right.
hears anything. No one knows our point. Bless you. No
Thank
one knows
you.
our point on anything. So it's really good to hear that you guys have started building this bond back together, because
Mm-hmm.
my version of it is you guys will end up being closer probably than you ever have your whole life, and that will continue to bond even stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I totally agree. So
Yeah. So
Well,
Rhonda, how hard was it for you to hear Heather say, Mom, this is how I feel, or this is how I felt, or this is how it affected me?
I mean, it's nice, and like she said, we have talked, you know, about it and stuff, and it's like to hear it is good for me. And I mean, I think she's still putting it lightly, because when we talk about my addiction, especially when she was in her teenage years and stuff like that, you know, the one thing about uh the alcohol and stuff, you're at such a low point, your esteem is so low that, you know, you'll do anything to have any kind of human contact, that was someone that understands you. So I was dating men and stuff like that. They were coming to my house. So she got to see that kind of slutty side of me.
mm-hmm.
And it wasn't, you know, that it was just companionship. You know, it was like I put myself out there and I attracted what I got. And I got into a lot of abusive relationships that way. And I'll tell you, like, some of the things that's hardest for me, and I'm going to go back to what I was just saying, is like when I see my granddaughter
Mm-hmm.
and I look at her, I mean, she is just like my little perfect little person. And but when I see her, especially now at this age, it takes me back thinking, shit, this is how old Heather was.
Mm-hmm.
This and this happened. So that's probably what hurts me the most. I mean, you hear Heather say something to me, I rather hear it and then assume I know what she's thinking and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So when I watch my little grandbaby, that I hate thinking about it, I think, oh, this is where I was.
Mm-hmm.
So, but when I'm talking about, like, I think Heather's seen more than what she's saying, and she had to deal with me and when I became an alcoholic, I was angry, I was mean, I was miserable, I was discontent,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just not a good person whatsoever. I mean, my alcoholism was, it was, I drank in the morning to get me through the day, to get me to lunch, to get me home, and that was what she constantly seen as well. And and I just couldn't give up the drink. And when her dad passed away when she was 13, this is where, like, when I start bringing in my higher self and my God, because um, I had to live with her and my twin sister allowed her to come live with her at age 13 after her dad. And the only way I could get my Social Security check to help take care of her was I had to be living with her. And so my sister, I hurt her incredibly. She asked me to come live at her house so I could take care of Heather. And I went out on the back porch and I whispered, I'm like, God, I go, just today, I go, I need to get sober. I have a little girl that just lost her dad and she needs me. And from that day forward, I had no desire. My cravings were gone, my obsession over and stuff like that. And we just lived a really good year for about a year and a half.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It's like everything I wanted to be as a mom and stuff. And I was going to school and I was working as a waitress, and that's probably the worst thing because one, it's stressful, but two, you got all these young kids that are going to go party. And I stayed strong. And I remember it was after finals, and I thought, maybe I could just drink an old Duels. And I picked up an old Duels and I drank it, and I had enough to wake up, whatever. And so I went and got a 6-pack of old Duels, and within weeks, I now had a 12-pack. I'm hiding it in the closet, thinking Heather can't see it. She's sitting on the side of the bed with me, begging me, Mom, please don't do this. You can do it. Always having to be the adult in the house. Always trying to convince me, taking me out to dinner, making sure I was sober so she could have conversations with me. Because once I started drinking, I was MIA.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gone. And so that was one of my things. But when I started drinking, I remember I took some muscle relaxers with alcohol, and and I remember dreaming, and I seen Corey, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And all of a sudden, I could hear a woman's voice saying, "It's not your time. It's not your time." And it felt like someone laid me back down on my bed, and I woke up. And from that day forward, I never took a pill with an alcohol, but I still kept drinking. And when Heather turned 18, because I lost the Social Security, I wasn't able to I wasn't able to pay for rent, because I was making $12 an hour, and I was full-fledged into my alcoholism. And I know this was like a hard time for Heather. She wants to jump in on this part.
Yeah. So it just to kind of like give some context, I guess. So I was about 10 when Mom was, doing meth and had gone to jail at some point, and was just trying to get her life back on track. And I think, so I was 13. And this whole time, like, Dad is also in active addiction, but I mean, it's interesting to have two parents that are addicts, but in different ways. Whereas with Mom, it was very apparent. It was very, like, it affected me extremely. Whereas with Dad, like, he was still able to function as like a parent to me. And so I was never as affected by his addiction as I was my mom's. But he did, kind of as you talked with Brian, this, he overdosed when I was 13. And at that point, I'm living with my grandparents. And I think like Mom had just you had just gotten out of jail. Like, I swear it was like you had just gotten out and we're living with grandma and just like trying to get back. And all of a sudden Dad dies. And now like we not only did like I lose my dad, but I had to learn who my mom was again, and like how to live with her again, and like how to, kind of have this whole dynamic. And so we moved in with my aunt for I think about a year. We lived there.
Yeah.
And then we had moved into an apartment together. And yeah, the first, year and a half, I was probably about 14 into 15. Like things went really well. I felt like I had like my mom again, and we could, and when she says like talk, like physically being able to talk to her and like have conversations where when the drinking was, you know, going on, like I couldn't even like have any sort of normal just conversation. And so just to even be able to have that conversation and know her um was really cool. And then, you know, and then like how she described, she starts drinking again at that point when I'm probably about 15 at this time. um and it was, yeah, I mean, kind of like how you described, you turn into a whole nother person. Like that's definitely how I felt, you know. um and I would, you know, go to school, and I had gotten a job, and I had like a really close friend. And her and I would just spend all of our time together just so that like I could be out of the house and have someone with me just to kind of help me cope. Um, and then, yeah, so when I turned 18, we we had moved in with grandma because we couldn't, you know, you couldn't afford the rent because of my social security and things. Um, and I felt like at that point, like the train kind of like went off the rails completely, at least for you, you know. For me, like she kind of talks about me like having to be the parent. Like I was, they call that like parentification, you know, and I was parentified from a pretty young age. So I learned how to be self-sufficient, and to be like hyper independent. So I applied for like my financial aid for college. I applied to college. I got into college, and I started taking classes that fall right after we had moved in with grandma. And not only that, but I had also gotten a new job in healthcare because that's what, you know, I was going to college for. And so it was an extremely stressful time. I was going to college full time. I was working, I think, basically almost full time while living in this environment that was just not, you know, not very good at all. Um, and so I think at that point, her I can't talk, alcoholism had kind of slowly gotten worse and worse. And I like really started distancing myself. At one point, I actually moved in with Brian, you know, my uncle. I lived with him for about a year and a half. Well, no, maybe not that long.
I think of that one,
So I don't,
maybe 6.
yeah, maybe
Okay.
6 months. And then I moved in with, at the time, my husband and I, we weren't married, but I moved in with him and his family for about a year and a half. And then, you know, kind of on from there. But really about that age is when I really like started separating myself, not only physically, but really mentally as well. Because in my brain, I'm thinking, like, this is it. Like, this is how our relationship ends. And at one point, she'd gotten so bad, like, I had fully anticipated that she was going to die. And I was fully prepared to get a call one day and say, hey, like, your mom's in the hospital and she's not doing well. And so I, like, through these years, I had kind of just already been grieving not even our relationship, but also her, like as a person and as a human and as, you know, my mom. I had really just started that grieving process because I didn't think that she would ever come back, you know, from all of this. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's hard to take because while you were talking, telling this story, Heather, I'm picturing what's gone on with my ex-wife, right?
mhm.
Seeing this person who I married and fell in love with turn into somebody that is no longer that person. Every once in a while you'd see glimpses of it,
Right,
you know, just a glimpse to kind of
right,
reel you back in, and then all of a sudden it's separated again. And to see to I've been the same way.
yeah,
My ex is homeless.
mhm,
Right now, she's trying to get into a recovery center, which hopefully she gets there on the 26th. And I've prepared myself as well, right?
mhm,
Especially when she's in the depth of her alcoholism. It's like I keep waiting every time I see a phone call, and if it's someone I don't recognize, or even if it's a private number,
right,
literally, I just get these knots in my gut tied up, and I'm
mhm.
like, this is it. This is the
This is the
call
call.
because I've
Mhm.
been preparing myself for it as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and it's so hard. It is so flipping hard because as you said, you were doing everything you could to separate yourself,
mhm.
right? Because you got to protect you. You're doing
Yeah,
everything you can to put yourself in a area that helps you survive.
yeah,
However, it doesn't make it it
Absolutely
doesn't
not.
make it easy at all.
No, no.
At all, because even though we're preparing ourselves and we separate ourselves, there's still that bond, right?
Mhm,
And for me, it's different. You guys play in a whole different sandbox when it's mother-daughter,
mhm.
right? Me, it's just a spouse or an ex-spouse. So I've said in the shows a lot of times, I'm playing in a separate sandbox than someone that has a mother, daughter, or son, father, however you want to look at it. When it's your children, it's a whole different thing.
Right.
And there have been some of my guests who have actually literally cut all relationships off to where they haven't talked to them in 15, 20 years. They don't
Mhm,
even know if they're still alive,
mhm.
and I just couldn't imagine. And it just breaks my heart knowing that addiction does that to our families. And I'm not talking just drugs and alcohol, right? I'm talking all
Anything.
addictions affect
Yeah.
the brain the exact same way.
Mhm,
I've said this on the show many times. It's just, it just hurts so bad knowing that it's breaking people apart. And I think that's why it's so important, especially nowadays with the way crap's going on out in the world. And I
mhm.
don't know a lot of it because I don't like to hear it and I don't watch the news. I want to stay in Al's happy bubble. I like to be in my own realm,
Yeah.
and life throws enough shit balls at me. I don't need shit balls
Mhm.
from somebody
I don't
else.
need it from outside.
I don't
Yeah,
need it from outside. So
totally.
yeah, it's tough. It really is tough.
Yeah.
Um, and with the little bit of time that we have left, I'd love to have Rhonda. So Rhonda, you go back into it. Heather's here is doing everything she can to protect herself and separate her from you. I know you've had to have seen this, right? You're just going, my gosh, I'm really losing my relationship with
Yeah.
the one person that just means, I mean, this is your and Corey's child. This is your DNA, and you're going, my gosh, am I going to lose this too? What was it? What flipping was it? Was another time where you went out and said, God, I need your help, that just literally opened your eyes and you're going, okay, enough's enough.
Well, and like she said, we already kind of disconnected and stuff. And I just want to, I had a doctor and I had him for like 38 years now. And he's watched me go through everything. And I would go in and he goes, I'm just waiting to sign your death certificate.
Mhm,
And there was other incidents like I remember I I thought I threw up tomato soup. It may have been blood, but then I had an issue when I went to the bathroom and stuff. And this is one of the phone calls that Heather got because I was going to go to the emergency, see everybody. You're going to see that I'm sick. And all I heard was ICU, and I don't remember anything until I woke up. And they said, you shouldn't even be here. You had so many bleeds. We had to add so much blood. So I tried to stay sober for like, I think I stayed sober 6 months and I started working. I got sick, and that's when my doctor wanted to put me on disability because I was still having bleeds. But I was also living with a guy that drank and, did drugs, and he had a sex addiction. He liked to bring women over. And so I had to deal with all that. And my last drink was, we were partying hard. And there was one other time we had partied really hard, and we went to what do you call it, a bar. And I woke up in the hospital, and the doctor's looking at me. You should be dead. Your alcohol level was a 5. And but what really got me, and this is where God has carried me through so much. But this last day that I drank was we had been drinking all weekend. It's heavy into vodka, and he was trying to get some girl to come over and bring some meth or something, bath salt, because he didn't want to be deemed for a drug test. Uh, and just knowing how weird I get on meth, I'm very weird anyway. And so thanks, Heather. And then he
right.
brought over another girl to be with him in the kitchen, and I'm just like, and they're in there smoking it. I said, fuck it. I go, here, like, I want to take a hit. And I took a big hit, and I went in the living room, and it's just like my whole body went into convulsions. I'm awake for it. No one's telling me oh, you did this and this. I had no muscle tone in my legs. I was shaken violently and I laid down. I couldn't breathe. And so I went and got some Valium. I took a couple of them thinking maybe it's just, I'm having anxiety. And I laid on the couch and I just asked God, I said, please let me live. Just let me wake up tomorrow and I'm going to quit. I go, this is it. And the things that went through my mind was Heather's going to lose another parent to this. My mom's going to lose a child. For the first time, I wasn't selfish, and all these little rambling thoughts of everyone that's going to be hurt over my actions. So my boyfriend finally called the ambulance, and I went into the hospital, and I knew I was done. And I'd been there 3 days, and like, have you called anybody yet? I said, no, I don't want anyone to know I'm here. And finally, the nurse convinced me to call my mom and my daughter. And my mom came and got me. But when I spoke to Heather, she's like, I'm done, Mom.
Mm-hmm.
I'm done. She don't know what to do or tell you or anything.
Yeah.
And like you can tell she just broke all ties. And so during that time, I had to learn how to walk. I had physical therapy come out. I could hold a water bottle, and I started taking our dog, for a walk, go around the block. And it took me about 3 months to finally get where I could actually go to AA meetings. And, AA was good for a lot of people, but it didn't work out for me. I had to try to gotten sober so many times in this 20-year span that I would ask for help. And, oh, even my own family was like, oh, we don't believe you're going to get.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, she locked up.
Oh, shoot.
Yeah. Hopefully the internet will kick back on.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll go over to you, Heather. While that's
Mhm.
changing. Do you remember that time pretty well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I remember. So I'm trying to, I think
When
I
you
must
get
have
with
been,
Oh,
oh,
there she
sorry.
is. She's back.
Good.
You froze up for a bit, Rhonda.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't hear
Oh,
anything you just said in the last 30 seconds.
oh, so just I went to AA and it didn't work out for me. Did you hear that part?
Yeah.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Okay. So, and my sponsor, she was fantastic. She helped me and stuff like that. But I don't think she could truly understand a concept what I had been through. But I'd be at AA and I couldn't really connect with anybody if I tried. People didn't want to really hear my story and stuff. And if I said something in a meeting, I'd always have a man, you know, with a little dick move, or I don't even know what you want to call it, but they like,
Like a little side comment or something.
yeah, a side comment. Like one actually said, you know what, it's the first of the year, we've got more people coming in. You need to find someone else to go talk to. We need to worry about other people. And that's how my perception. So this whole time I've gotten sober, I have really done it on my own. And it has been just this last year because I went through, you're sober doesn't mean you don't meet bad people. And I did. And it was about a year and a half ago, my sister-in-law, Corey's sister, introduced me to energy healing and stuff. And I started learning how to do meditation and energy healing. And I just started practicing Reiki. And doing that has helped my mental health. It's really like helped me calm down uh, and so forth. So it was that moment, like God struck me with lightning, like pay the fuck attention. And I went to the hospital and I had to regrow. And it was like being reborn. The best way I could say it is like I had to learn everything. Now I got to make a relationship with my daughter, and she's still sketchy, and I don't have what I want with her, and it has been this last couple of years that we have talked more and stuff like that because I saw a lot of her issues coming out, especially when her baby was born, and thinking you weren't a parent, you can't tell me, and I really had to step back and let her do those emotions. And, a lot of it was hurtful, but it was also healing. I don't want to pretend nothing happened because, here it is that I was told I wouldn't even have a child and I have one. And and I blew the only chance of being a mother, but yeah, I could still be a mother. So when I say God sent, I mean, I should have died at least 3 or 4 times. I'm here, and I'm trying to reach out to help other people, and it's just it's so heart aching when you see. I work in a facility with people that come in a drug rehab. I'm a cook, so they all come talk to me, and I try to give them that attention. But yeah, if I'm here, it's just by the grace of God. I believe in my higher self, the universe, whoever it might be. And when I have my bad days, I just take a pause, take a deep breath in, and I ask him, just help me get through this day. And the one thing that keeps me sober is I remember the very last day I drank, and it scares the shit out of me. It horrifies me because I know that was my last drink, and I'll never recover. And so,
Yeah.
Yeah.
with that being said, thank you.
My gosh, this is so amazing because, and I just want to throw this out there. You didn't do it alone. You had a higher power helping
Yes, I did.
helping you get through that. And it's so amazing where that does take us, right? And you just also said, Rhonda, that, you know, you gave away being a mother to Heather.
Yeah.
However, you are here, and this is just my version of it. And I
You're fine.
gathered all this up just from all the 300 plus people I've interviewed.
Mhm.
Is God saved you to be here, to be one of his angels, to walk amongst the rest of us who are hurting,
Mhm.
to be that light for some other individual. And who not better to be that light than someone who's walked the darkness?
Mhm.
Because now you're helping other individuals, or you're giving suggestions to other individuals. And however, maybe you did lose that time as a mother with Heather. However, you've got something whole new with the granddaughter, right?
Yeah.
Because I have
Yeah.
3 grandkids myself, 2 granddaughters and a grandson. And I tell you what, they have just been the light of my life. They have changed me in
Mhm.
so many ways because I get to see how everything's, as they were babies growing up, to where, everything was so new to them and amazing. And I remember
Yeah.
one day looking at a picture of my first granddaughter, the first time she saw snow, and just that look on her face. And I'm thinking to myself, why isn't that us as adults cannot look at this the same way they're looking at it? And it's
Mhm.
because
Yeah.
we've allowed the outside world to come in and fog and pollute our minds.
Mhm.
Where if we open up our minds, which meditation and breath work and things like that, because I do that stuff too, it helps ground us and helps bring
Mhm.
us back in. And also to start having these healthy conversations that you and Heather are having. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, that alone is so massive,
Mhm.
so massive, because eventually, again, my version of it, it's going to bring that bond even closer and stronger together.
Right.
And the chain has been broken, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Heather, correct me if I'm wrong. However, you lost a father who
Mhm.
I still remember your dad in high school. I mean, he was one of those guys that in with the bodybuilding. He was a
Yeah.
built so I mean,
Yeah.
he looked great, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I first started getting in bodybuilding, I'm like, dude, I want to freaking look like that.
Yeah.
He looked amazing, right?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
you have a mom that goes into addiction. Heather, you could have fallen into that same freaking cesspool so easily,
Mhm.
so easily.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whatever you did for yourself, whatever strength you pulled together to
Mhm.
be able to step out of that and go, nope, it ends with me. And now
Mhm.
that you have a daughter, I'm guessing, you're damn sure, uh,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
not going to happen to my daughter, because I know what it's like. I went through it,
Yeah.
so again, this could be the whole blessing behind it all, because I think you guys know there's a lesson behind everything. I don't know if this is the lesson. I don't have a clue.
Yeah.
However, it could be.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just, I just remember having a perspective from very young, like I want my life to be very different because, this also gets into, I think a lot about like generational trauma, where mom, her dad was a severe alcoholic, and so she kind of had that trauma. And also back like with my generation, I feel like we are much more open to talking about mental health, like depression, anxiety, and everything. And, kind of with my parents' generation, like you just didn't talk about it, right? And so I think a lot of those like suppressed emotions kind of lead to more, to addiction. That's just kind of my little side thought. But
Yeah.
I just remember being just young and being like, this is just not what I want. I want to just have like a comfortable home and just like a safe home, and to not have this like chaos. And so my parents, they were always very encouraging of me, like, you should go to college, you should get a higher education, like you should, do something kind of in that way. And so I went to college and I got my nursing degree. And I currently work in the emergency department. And it's been, it's been awesome. And it feels good to have now what I like always just wanted in my life, just like a comfortable home and like just peace, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I talked to my therapist a lot about this, and she's like, you very easily could have, gone that other way. And it just takes a lot of strength and a lot of perseverance and a lot of work to not have done that. But in my brain, it felt like the only option was to do it differently, because I couldn't, like, I could not handle a full life of chaos and disruption. So that's kind of where I just always been very like internally motivated just to do it differently. And I can't explain it. I don't. He's like, how did you do it? I said, I don't know. I just knew
Even I asked that same
way,
question.
so try it a different way.
Well, and really, I don't know if you need to know how you did it. I'm just, and I'm sure your mom feels the same way. I
Yeah.
think we're both happy that you did, because
Mhm.
again, you broke that chain. You definitely
Yeah.
broke that chain, and now you're starting to connect other chain links in a healthier way. So, I tip my hat off to both of you, and I mean that seriously, because it's hard. It is so flippin' hard to watch someone that you love and care about slowly destroy their life and
Mhm.
slowly kill themselves right in front of you. And it's so hard to distance yourself from that. And again, as we talked about early in the show, and just waiting for that call. And also for the person who's battling that demon as well, because I like to use the analogy of eagles. I love eagles and hawks and owls, because they're very graceful, and their talons, bless you, their talons, they're so sharp and they're so strong, that, and I look at it as that addiction, that the addiction is the talons, and it's got a hold of you, because it doesn't matter, even if you release two of the talons, there's still three more that's just buried so deep in you. And it's hard to pluck each one out at a time to get yourself to where you want to be. And until you can have someone, as a higher power, whatever that higher power is to you, it doesn't matter, to help release that, right, and get your life back on track. And I was at an emergency center this past week with my ex, and the nurse there, very lovely nurse, actually, when she walked by me to take my ex to the restroom, um, she went and she was tapping my hand, and I opened up my hand and she put a chip in it.
Mm.
And it was like 30 something year chip, and then when she came back, I said, thank you for sharing this with me. And she goes, hey, I just live one day at a time. That's just how I see it, just one day at a time. And I just made a post on my Facebook just a couple days ago that I'm doing my best just to live in the moment right now. I live here in the moment. And believe me, I mean, it's been a long time for me. I don't even know, because I've not even kept track. But there are still times when I've been hit in the face with those shit balls where I'm like, you know what? I think I'll make some phone calls, and I think maybe I'll do some lines and have some alcohol today. You
Mhm.
know, and then I'm like, oh wow, where the hell did that come from? Okay, I got to do something to get my mind
Yeah.
occupied, right? And I'm off doing something else. So
Mhm.
it's a tough road. It's a tough road for everyone. And again, I tip my hat off to both of you, and it breaks my heart that Corey's no longer here with us. And sometimes I think God calls people back home because he knows their battle is just so strong. He can use them for something else, you
Mhm.
know, and sometimes it also helps us in our journey. Yeah, I don't know how, but I don't know. Maybe sometimes it does help us in our journey. So,
Mhm.
okay. So ladies, my gosh, to wrap this up, Rhonda,
Yes.
what does the other side of addiction mean to you?
The other, I would, you know, I've been on both sides, you know, I too was a receiver of dealing with a person with alcohol, and my best advice is that it does get better. You know, you go down this path, you're on the deepest, darkest path that you can't imagine how the hell you're going to crawl out of it. It's somewhere you just got to find that little tiny piece inside you and let it grow, and believe in yourself. And you know, I watch it every day now with the clients I deal with, and it's a daily reminder. And I mean, your program is awesome. I mean, the way that you present everything, the way you talk. I mean, just even when you were talking about, you know, like Corey being an angel stuff, that's the stuff I believe in. And you know, there's definitely two perceptions, and this is where I get hard to talk about, because it's easier said than done to get sober. And you know, and you got to find something inside you to do it for yourself and not for anybody else, because you'll fail every time. And I did it for myself. And yeah, and the one thing I wanted to say, and you know, like with Corey, he was able to hide it well, because he could stay calm and stuff. You know, a lot of people didn't see his anger, but for the most part, you couldn't tell you even had a problem. With me, I was like crazy. And but I love your program. I love what you're representing, what you're putting out. You know, it's not, you know, drugs are out there. It can get anybody. It don't matter who you are. You know, we all want to try it, and I hear horrible stories at work. You know, like of what people go through and what the drugs do, what these new drugs do, and it scares
Mhm.
the hell out of me. And I just, you know, I with Heather, I felt like maybe this made her stronger in the long run, to be able to handle where she's at. And it made me have to go live on the street and understand, because I was one of those one, like, why can't you quit? Why is it so hard? And so I got to walk on both sides. And I love what you're putting out there. I mean, it needs to be out there a lot more than what it is.
Mhm.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you definitely for sharing it. Heather, for you, what suggestions could you give to those who have been, again, on the other side of addiction, who have not ever dabbled in that, but to also
Yeah.
see what you've seen and to be able to hold your strength and go in the direction that you need to go?
Um, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is therapy. I've done a lot of therapy, and I will continue to do therapy probably, you know, until I'm in the ground, because just having those tools and learning just how to cope with everything that you've been through um is like beyond words. Um, it's really been interesting to kind of go through therapy and start healing a lot of these, you know, parts of myself, and doing kind of like some inner child work, different things like that. But I've also found like a profound sense of empathy for, you know, like my mom and my dad, they were, you know, they they're both doing this all for the first time, just like I am, right? And just learning to know, kind of seeing where they've been and how they got there, and just learning to have that empathy through like significant amounts of therapy has been really kind of eye-opening for sure. You know, kind of like you said, like addiction does not discriminate at all. And I I would recommend, you know, one, therapy, but also talking about your story. And I think you'll find that a lot of people are in, you know, have had similar situations, then they just don't talk about because maybe they're ashamed or maybe they're embarrassed or, you know, different things. But this addiction, and especially in this state, to even like pills, opiates, you know, fentanyl, heroin, it is even just alcohol. I mean, it is so much more common than people believe. So I think being open, sharing your story will kind of, you know, attract those other people that say, oh, hey, I also had something similar in my life, or my parents were also addicts, or my, you know, I had a family member who was an addict and I kind of experienced this, and just really building that community and building those bonds, I think really helps strengthen you. So.
I love it. I mean, both what you guys just shared here at the end is amazing because again, it goes back to the voices, right? And you said a key word, Heather, too, the empathy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I learned that through my training this past winter as, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to be certified as a crisis and recovery coach. And
Mm-hmm.
you know, one of the things of starting this show is to also help get rid of that stigma, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because I was one of those guys too that went downtown and saw the unsheltered, the alcoholics and drug addicts, and
Absolutely.
even make my comments underneath my breath. Now that I've lived in it and been around it, my empathy has just changed so much. And I don't remember if I shared this earlier in the show or not, but my friend Joe again woke me up, gave me a hard reality the other day because a couple of weeks ago I was on the phone with my ex and she was saying that she had a place to live for a couple of days. She met this guy on the tracks and he offered to let her stay there. And I was pissed. I'm like, are you
Mhm.
effing crazy? I mean, are you serious? You don't even know this guy and you went to his home. He could have sold you for sex. He could have done this. He could have done that. And
Mhm.
I was telling my buddy, now my buddy understands because he's been homeless, right?
Right.
He's lived this life. And being the good friend that he is, he goes, Al, this is her journey, not yours. He
Mhm.
goes, that woman is in survival mode. She'll do anything she can to get herself off the streets and put a roof over her head.
Right.
He
Yeah.
goes, I
Mhm.
would have done the same thing. She's got a 50-50 chance of something happening to her on the streets just as much as she does staying in some random dude's house.
Mhm.
And that really opened my mind and my heart so much more going, oh my gosh, because he even said, have you been homeless before? And I'm like, no. He goes, well,
Mhm.
then what she's telling you that you don't understand, she's right, because you don't effing understand.
Mhm.
And so again, it's us being on the other side, right? We're looking at it through our vision, not
Yeah.
realizing that we should really look at it through their vision, right? And having that empathy and to sit down, like you said, too, to find someone to talk to, use your voice. I used to do my shows on Thursday when I had my studio. And I had one of my guests say, Al, did you go through therapy to help you cope with everything you've coped through? And I
Mhm.
said no at first. And I said, no, no, actually I do. And they're like, oh, really? And I said, yeah, every Thursday. I'm like,
Mhm.
really? Every Thursday? And I says, yeah. So I've been doing it and I think at that time the show had been going on for about 2 years. And I said, yeah, I've been doing it for about 2 years. And they're like, really? So who do you go to? I says, oh, it's here in the studio.
Mhm.
They're like, what? And I'm like,
Yeah.
no, seriously, because I am getting my therapy from you guys, from
Mhm.
Right.
my guests. That's my therapy because I learn something all the freaking time
Mhm.
to help me better understand, especially listen to Rhonda's story, right? I've seen a lot of what she explained. However, to see it through another individual's eyes, you know, it's still I still learn. And to have someone on the show who's been on the other side, especially a child, and to see it through their eyes, because now I'm connecting a little bit more because I've walked that same path, you know. So
Mhm.
again, I just have to say thank you to both you guys for being vulnerable and opening up, because I know it's not easy. And Rhonda, I was glad to finally see you kind of relax. You started finally
Yeah.
settling in and chilling, which I knew that you would. You
Yeah.
know, it does get a little nerve wracking when you first start, because you're going, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell a story of a time in my life that I was not proud of. And I tell you what, it
Yeah.
takes some big kahunas to do that. So thank you. Seriously, thank you for
Yeah.
coming on the show and for doing that.
Yeah.
So again, ladies, thank you so much. Thank you to all our past guests and all our past sponsors. And thank you again to all our listeners. You guys are the ones that are making this possible. You guys are the ones that just keeps this thing going. And I just want to say thank you, guys. I love every single one of you. And remember this, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.